Hey guys, so we're going to let folks kind of trickle in here over the next couple of minutes, but I hope you're having a good night thus far, all things considered. If you're watching this and you're a little bit closer to the coast or down into parts of southeastern Louisiana, hang in there. This is when the probably the roughest part of the storm is coming for you guys. Hopefully you're somewhere where you can be for a while. I've received not a handful, many questions from folks. A lot of times asking, am I safe to be in one particular place? Um, like I tell folks all the time, I'm not a good person to ask. I'm not there, right? Like, have I been to your house or seen the trees around your house or the little creek that runs through your backyard? I might have a better idea of is it safe. But only you know that, and I would encourage you if you're watching this right now and you've got questions about am I safe where I am, um, think about for just a second, a couple minutes maybe, and you kind of sit there and go, would I feel safer if I were somewhere else? Would I really feel safer if I were somewhere else? And if the answer is yes, then leave. Go to the place where you feel safest. Now, if you sit there and you go, would I feel safe somewhere else, or would I feel like I'm just as you know, uh, anxious about the weather, and it's more the anxiety about the weather that's causing you some trepidation about things, well, then maybe you're okay at your house, or wherever it is that you're located. So just kind of keep that in mind. But let's jump into the forecast now that a handful of you guys are on here right now. This is a look right now at Francine. It went through a fair bit of intensification leading right up to shore. Got all the way up to a Category 2 100-mile-an-hour wind, but you can see that the dry air is a coming on the back side of this thing. Over on the west side, you can see all this yellow in here that's starting to encroach upon the west side of the storm. It's kind of eroding away at some of the features that it had a little bit earlier. This is anticipated. This is something that we've been waiting to happen. Basically, knew that it was coming. It was just a matter of time about when it got on shore. Here's the radar from well back earlier today, and you can see how it was moving off to the northeast, moving to the northeast, moving to the northeast, and then as it got a little bit closer to shore, it kind of widens out the eye a little bit and starts to maybe drift a little more off to the east than true northeast, and now it looks like it may be trying to get back off to the kind of north or north-northeast again. On top of that, the reason, by the way, that the south side of this looks kind of ragged is all the radars are on land and it can't see all the way through the eye. There's just too much stuff going on in there. The reason that it looks like the back half of this is gone once it moves ashore is because that dry air is starting to get in there. And that means that we're probably going to start to see that kind of arm feature that I was talking about earlier on the east side of this thing really start to pick up in intensity as we move through time. I apologize if I yawn a lot during this. It's really late. It's like a little bit past my bedtime already. So hang with me with that. So as this continues to move north, we will take a peek at the forecast in the National Hurricane Center, which has this thing as a tropical storm as we head through the overnight hours, and it has it in parts of north central Mississippi by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon. So if you can imagine driving from roughly New Orleans to, let's call it, north of Jackson, Mississippi, and it taking approximately, what would this be, about 15 hours. That's about how slow this thing is going to be going. Real bad traffic on 55, that's for sure. But the storm's going to be moving pretty slow over the next few hours in particular. It'll start to speed up a little bit tomorrow morning, but even then, it's not going to be moving too fast. Model guidance here in terms of what we're looking at. I wonder if we've got, oh yes, we do have some updated stuff. We'll look at wind gusts in here. A pretty good idea of where it is right now near Homa. And then as we move through time, hour by hour, you can see the time there up top. This is at 11 o'clock, midnight. Notice how slow this is going. Midnight, it's still near New Orleans. I would say that this is probably running a little slow because it's kind of near New Orleans right now. But I think as we head through, midnight, 1 o'clock, so this is 3, let's subtract an hour. Just subtract an hour from this because I think it's running a little slow. So we'll say 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., just north of Hattiesburg. And then finally it starts to get a moving. But some of these wind gusts in here are as high as 50 and 60 miles an hour. we kind of mouse over here, it's probably tough for you guys to see if you're watching on a phone, but that's 60. That's a patch of 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts moving through parts of George and Greene counties as we head through the overnight hours. 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts down across parts of Jackson County. Folks in Pascagoula that may be watching right now, upwards of maybe even 70 miles an hour. I think in the hour-by-hour, or not the hour-by-hour, the Canada County forecast I put out, I tried to really top-end these winds for if we get in a situation. Here, let me go over to the radar here. If we get into a situation, by the way, when I go to the radar, I also want to point two things out here that are very, very important for all 500 of you guys that are sitting around. So you see, we've already got one little warning box out here from the National Weather Service. Of course, this is out. No one should be out in the water, but just in case, it's there. As these storms, I'll use that loosely, these cells move inland, if we can mix down some of the wind that is aloft, and the last time the hurricane hunters were in there, they were picking up flight level winds at about 100 knots, which would be about 115 miles an hour, I think. Those are going to weaken as this moves ashore, but if we can mix down some of those, that's why I think the top end of some of the wind speeds that you may see underneath some of these stronger cells could be very gusty. 65, 75, 80 mile an hour wind gusts. Now, this isn't going to be sustained winds at 60 to 80 miles an hour for an extended period of time. This is going to be a big gust of wind like you'd catch in one of these springtime thunderstorms where you get the wind gust that rolls through for 5 minutes maybe tops, and then you're done. Then you're back down to winds at 20 to 40 gusting to 45, 50, maybe even 60 miles an hour. Now, the other very important thing to note here, and I want to change this over to storm relative velocity. Now, oftentimes when we look for tornadoes, as meteorologists, the National Weather Service, when they do it too, they're looking for when the red touches the green, right? That's what you always hear when you're watching probably TV. In tropical situations, you're not gonna get that. So if you're somebody that likes to look at radar and try and pick out where the tornadoes are gonna be, you're not gonna find them. So here's the radar in Mobile. That's just a mess of. In fact, here we can. Look at some of these wind speeds aloft, 60, 70. Again, so if we mix some of these down, you're mixing down 70 mile an hour wind. Now, by the time it gets to the surface, you're talking about like 65, 60. This isn't too high off the ground. You're talking, the radar beam is here, so what are we, 800 feet, 1,000 feet off the deck? You're talking about 60 mile an hour wind. If it rains, and this is how you mix these down, you get these showers that rain really hard, and it literally pulls the air down with it, and it mixes that wind down to the surface, and you can get some pretty strong wind in here. If we kind of zoom back and we take a look out here, so there is a couplet. So here's a couplet, right? So that is an actual couplet, but this is well offshore. Here, let me turn this off. This is well offshore here, where you're not mixed in with all the rain and everything else that's happening, and it's just a blob like this. So you may get tornado warnings as we head through tonight. If you're somebody that likes watching a radar like this, you go, where's the tornado? You're going to be looking at that. Go, where's the tornado? I don't see a thing. The folks at the National Weather Service have some really cool tools, stuff that I don't have access to for sure, to pick these things out. They also have fantastic radar meteorologists working there to pick these things out as well. Like, that's just gobbledygook. But they're able to use their tools, their radar, their stuff, their experience to find some of these. So kind of keep that in mind as we head through the overnight hours tonight, that there are going to be situations where you're looking in here going like, what do you mean tornado warning? That doesn't look like the typical tornado warning that I'm used to seeing, but in tropical environments, they tend to look a fair bit differently. Speaking of the radar, you folks in Hattiesburg and down toward Lumberton, out toward basically everywhere in Stone County, you folks in Wiggins are included in this, and then down along the coast dealing with a fresh batch of heavy rain. This does lighten up as you move north and toward 84. You folks in Laurel, Collins, out toward, we'll call Bassfield and Monticello as you make your way out toward Brookhaven. The stuff really does kind of calm down. Same goes the other direction as you make your way toward Waynesboro and out into parts of Alabama. But as you make your way down 59 through Laurel, down to Hattiesburg, Lumberton, you folks, as you make your way back off to the west, out in Olo, as I mentioned yesterday, I love my folks in Olo, out toward Columbia, Tylertown, You folks are getting into a fair bit of rain right now as well. And then down toward Poplarville, Bogalusa, and then getting into New Orleans, which is finally just getting out of that eye wall and that most intense part of the storm that moved into town what feels like about 2 hours ago. I want to say that it was maybe even 3 now, probably a little bit closer to about 6-ish when it really started to hammer the city. So they've been dealing with it for a fair bit of time now. Okay, so let's go back over to some of the model guidance here. So now that we've kind of discussed all that, you can kind of get an idea of where there's your center of the storm. The strongest wind is going to be probably along 59 and probably just off to the east of there, and then right along the coast as well. Apologies. And so kind of keep that in mind as we head through the next few hours, that as this pushes northward, we are going to march that strongest wind north and the strongest gusts of wind north, but probably the sustained wind, and in fact we can look at that real quick here, the sustained wind probably isn't going to change very much across most of the area. You've got your sustained wind somewhere between about 20 and 30 miles an hour. For South Mississippi, coastal Mississippi is between about, we'll call it 25 and 40 miles an hour. Southeastern Louisiana is somewhere between about 30 and 40 miles an hour of sustained wind. But as this kind of dies, as it moves north, you're going to lose a lot of that top end sustained wind. So so you folks out in Oak Grove are dealing with 20 to 40 mile an hour winds. Same goes in Hattiesburg, same goes in Ellisville, same goes in Laurel, same goes in Waynesboro almost. And that's why on the county by county forecast, a lot of those wind speeds were roughly the same for sustained wind. 20 to 25 on the low end and kind of like 40 to 50 on the top end for a lot of folks, is because it's going to be falling apart as it moves north, so that core of strongest wind is going to fall apart as well. So everyone kind of holds somewhere between about 25 and 40 for a sustained wind. And then the wind gusts are going to be dictated by where those heaviest cells are going to be and where we can mix down some of that wind. So even if you're north of 84, you folks in like Bay Springs and Lewin and out toward Raleigh and maybe the other direction as you make your way toward like Quitman, folks out in McGee, kind of same thing goes. You're talking about that sustained wind about 25 to 40 miles an hour starting in the next few hours. That kind of holds kind of all night long. With the wind gust, then, if you get underneath one of these heavier cells, upwards of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and that's going to weaken as you move farther away from the coast. So maybe the top end wind speed around 98 is about 65 to 70 miles an hour. Up around 84 is probably about 55 to 60 miles an hour. And then as you make your way up to about I-20, as we get into tomorrow morning, the strongest wind gusts will probably be between somewhere 45 to 55 miles an hour. But it's going to take a while for this thing to march its way north. You can see it makes it to I-20 tomorrow morning, according to this model. It says at 10 a.m., but remember, we want to subtract an hour because I think it's moving a little too slow. So we'll call it about 8 or 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that's a lot of information, I know. Okay, so let's take it over to another model. Let's refresh this bad boy and see if we've got... This is as latest as we got. All right, sweet. So let's put this thing into motion and see. This one has it up around, we'll call it northeastern Marion, northern Lamar County, kind of Summerall-ish area by 9Z. So that'd be by about 3 a.m. Versus this model, which has it, and let's see if I can one-to-one that here, about the same place at 7 a.m. So 3 a.m., 7. This is tropical model, normal weather model. Tropical model sometimes is a little bit better, but also tends to run a little too fast. And this is where we got into trouble. I say we, me. I got into trouble following some of these tropical models, which wanted to move the storm a little bit faster, which is why the forecast kept slowing down. Now, on top of it, the storm itself kept slowing down. But if you go with these tropical models, sometimes they're just a little too quick. And I think we're in that situation here. Where it says by 3 a.m. or center of the things over Summerall or something like that. I think it's going to be a little bit later than that. Maybe not by much, maybe 4 or 5 a.m. But unless this thing really starts picking up speed, which, we can kind of eyeball here on the radar presentation. You can see how fast it was moving before. This is when it was going about we'll call it about 15, 16 miles an hour, and it kind of speeds up, and then it really puts on the brakes as it gets closer to shore, and has really slowed down over the last little bit, and doesn't look like it's making as much northerly progression as it was previously when it was doing 15 to 16 miles an hour. So we'll have to see when this thing really starts picking up speed again, and once it does, then of course we'll get a better idea of specifically when things are going to be done for. But for now, we've got to kind of bounce between the models. The one that I think is going too slow, and this other one which I think is going just a hair too fast. For folks, by the way, I've got the comments up over here on the left. I can see them kind of flashing at me. They're coming in pretty quick. For folks that are asking, hey, what about where I live? There is that county by county forecast. It's over on the app. If you don't want to leave the discussion right now, you can kind of wait until we're all said and done. But I do have a county by county breakdown. If for whatever reason, while I'm going through stuff here, I don't say anything specifically about your county or your town, I've got that post there for you guys, which should have all the same information I'd be discussing here, just written there. All right. If you're living along the coast, the one thing, the Mississippi coast, 4 to 6 feet, you're pretty much done with surge along the Louisiana coast, probably 3 to 5 for you folks in Jackson County, 2 to 4 for the Mobile Bay and out toward Mobile and Baldwin counties. The other thing is the arrival time of these winds. We'll go to most likely, and yeah, your percent chance that you deal with tropical storm force wind, pretty much 100% if you're living in Louisiana, and pretty high for you folks in Pike, Walthall, Marion, and Pearl River counties in Mississippi, and probably a good sliver of Lamar County as well. Again, tropical storm force wind, 39 miles an hour. So you're pretty much guaranteed that's going to happen. For folks on the fringe of that, which, you're kind of saying, okay, it's a, better than 2/3 shot, is basically most of southwestern Mississippi, kind of up 55, you got, Pike County, and then just north of that is Lincoln County, and then Lawrence County. Look at this. I've been away from home so long, I'm starting to forget the names and places of the counties on the map. Doggone it. Anyway, as you make your way out toward the east, Forest County would be in there. Your folks in Stone County, George County, Greene County is probably in there as well. Although probably right on the fringe for you folks in Greene County. I actually tend to think that the sustained wind for Greene County isn't going to be as much of a problem. It's the wind gusts that are going to be a problem. Same goes with Wayne County. You folks in Jones County are probably a part of this. Like, you're going to get tropical storm force wind for at least a little while group. Same goes with Covington County. You folks in Jeff Davis County as well are probably a part of that. And I would probably put Jasper, Smith, and Simpson County in there as well. Other places are probably going to be more worried about the wind gusts rather than the sustained winds. So the other part of this is that, somebody just asked, hey, is this thing going to weaken as it moves north? Yes, it is. And we were talking about the weakening of the storm on the southern part of it too. And I think looking at the radar here is the best way to kind of visualize this. Watch as this thing moves ashore. So the dry air, see how all these showers over here are just evaporating? I wish I could, okay, hold on. I can kind of run this back. So you see how all the showers out here are moving from kind of east to west. But watch all of these showers out here just evaporate in the dry air that's in place and moving toward Francine. Now you get a couple of these guys that kind of fire up along some of the boundaries and perturbations, but they all fall apart pretty quickly. And then as this thing moves ashore, there's no bottom to this storm. So here's the center. There's no southern flank of this, right? And then we've got this arm that's fired up of showers and thunderstorms on the east side. So this is, you get the dry air entrainment in here. You got another batch of dry air trying to dry slot in here. And along the boundary between this dry air that's trying to kind of sneak its way into the center of this storm and the very humid air that's getting pulled north and, that just kind of hangs out over the Gulf of Mexico on any given day, is leading to the development of a daisy chain of showers and maybe even some thunderstorms in here and some pretty gusty wind. that little arm is going to travel north and probably off to kind of the northeast over the next few hours. But where the center of this storm, Francine, decides to go is also going to play a part in dictating where this goes. And that's going to be where I think the gustiest wind is going to be outside of the places that deal with like the core, the eye wall of this storm. So kind of, folks in George, Greene, Jackson counties, and then off into parts of Alabama, I know you're probably looking at this from afar going like, oh, well, I'm not going to get the center of this storm, so I may not have anything to worry about. You probably don't have the sustained wind and like the really, really, really heavy long-term rain to worry about. It's this little arm that's out here that I'm a little more concerned about. Some of you folks may remember a similar situation. This is a long time ago now. But I believe it was Tropical Storm Cindy that impacted the area back in, it would have been 2016 or 2017, so about like 6, 7, 8 years ago now, where it actually went into parts of Louisiana, but it had this same arm feature well off to the east of it, and it ended up producing a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and a lot of tornadoes across parts of southeastern Louisiana, Mississippi, and into parts of Alabama. So that's one thing to keep tabs on as we head through the next few hours. Question on here. Oh, so Tylertown, folks in Tylertown already without power in some places. Already without power in some places. Okay, thank you for that, Tara. Why don't we say anything about Highway 15 from Laurel to Bay Springs? I'd be happy to say something about Highway 15 from Laurel to Bay Springs. So if you go from Laurel to Bay Springs on Highway 15, here comes the rain as we head through the overnight hours. You're going to get rain and some pretty gusty wind. Pretty much everywhere is going to get rain and gusty wind. And the reason that I'm focusing, and it's been a long time since I've done this, but I suppose I should remind folks that, like, if I'm not talking about, like, your spot right now, it's probably because the places that I am talking about kind of need this information right now. Now, this is more important during, tornadoes, for instance. But in situations like this, I try to focus my energy and attention on the folks that are probably going to be dealing with the worst of the stuff first, which in this case is going to be kind of southeastern Louisiana, kind of coastal and super south Mississippi. As this moves north, it will tend to fall apart. You'll still get the gusty wind across parts of Jones County, Wayne County, Clark County, Jasper County. But I tend to think that you'll probably deal with a tornado threat as we head through the early hours tomorrow morning, maybe 2, 3, 4 a.m. But I think that your tornado threat is going to be limited, and it's going to come into question about where that arm sets up and where Francine goes specifically. And as much as I would love to sit here and say I know exactly where that thing's going to go, I have learned over the years, and you folks that have lived in South Mississippi long enough probably have learned this too, these hurricanes, they kind of decide to do whatever they want. And in fact, I've got proof of that. If I run this back, okay, hold on, we're gonna go regional here, and I want to get maybe I'll go continental. A big picture here. So here's the Francine right now. Notice how the general, I'm going to run this back even further. The general flow here in the atmosphere is from like bottom left to kind of upper right? Like that's just kind of like generally everything's kind of drifting that direction, including Francine. This big yellow area is all this dry air in here. The one thing that we had out here, and we're gonna have some fun. You guys are gonna come along for a ride. We're gonna go continental here too, and I want to do that bad boy, and we're gonna do that one. No, that one. There we go. The one thing. Okay, so that's too big. I lied. Maybe not that big. How about that big? So there's Francine right in there. You got another little area of low pressure in here. And what's happening is I think the reason that we saw that little pivot, I mentioned this the other day, is they tend to do a little jig in here. But once this moves north, you've got a big trough in the, kind of, we'll call it the Rocky Mountains, Pacific Northwest. But then you've got this big ridge that plops up over parts of the Great Lakes. So your flow around this is going to be clockwise. So it's going to kind of shove it back off to the west. Your flow here is going to be from southwest to northeast. And then we get a ridge that tries and builds back over Texas, and it gets kind of stuck. And so it's not moving a whole lot over the next few days, and then it finally kicks on out of here as we get... Here, let me run this back. Here we go. Sunday, Friday, Saturday. Here we go. Sunday, it finally starts to probably mosey on out of here. And so because there's not a lot of like directionality and there's not a lot of push out, it's just kind of a general flow, this thing will tend to float a little more than maybe other systems would. And so when we see stuff like this, and then you see the kind of arm on the radar that's kind of developed, you kind of go, okay, now where do I think this is going to go? If it drifts one direction or the other by 5 or 10 miles, then we end up in a situation where we're switching counties for where the heaviest rain is, where the gustiest wind is, where the true tornado threat is. And I am not that good at forecasting the weather to tell you where a hurricane is going to wobble by 5 or 10 miles. These things are a couple 100 miles across, and 5 to 10 miles for this thing ain't nothing. And so I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you it's going to do exactly this. Anybody that does, good for them. I wouldn't trust them though. Been pouring and windy here for a good bit in Olo. Oh, good. I'm glad my folks in Olo are checking in. Sorry you're dealing with all the rain, but yes, the rain is going to continue. We'll send it back over to the radar here, and I'll put this thing into motion. This is kind of the closer up radar. It's probably hard to see, so we can kind of zoom in here. Oh my goodness, this is just ugly. So there's Prentice, Monticello. We've got Columbia in here. You folks in Olo are right here. Hattiesburg, Lumberton. We can kind of swing on down here to Poplarville. But look at all of this rain. Here, I can kind of zoom out here. Look at all that rain. A lot of water going to be coming out of the sky. Let me pause this real quick, and we'll take a peek at just how much rain has come down in the last 3 hours. A lot of water. Zoom in here. I'm going to switch this over to Mobile and see if I can't get a better... No, it's just... What ends up happening, there's so much rain that's fallen here that it kind of blows out the scale. So, you're sitting up here going, oh, yeah, Nick, I've had way more than a half inch of rain. And I trust you when you say that. You probably have. But it kind of blows out the scale sometimes when you get, 2, 3, 4, and you come down here, 5, 6, 7 inches of rain. And a lot of the rain that's coming down oftentimes is underdone by the radar in these tropical events because the raindrops are so small. The radar can't pick up on all of them. And so it ends up saying, oh yeah, you got about a half inch of rain, and you've got 2 or maybe even 3 inches of rain. Sometimes it can really undercut things. So let me catch up on a couple more things here. Missed the Smith County Outlook. So Brittany, that's over on the website. You can grab that too anytime. But this is just going to be moving north, and everyone's going to be dealing with a fair amount of rain and wind as we head through probably the overnight hours. It is 9:30. Somebody asked what time it was. I missed it. It just disappeared. The problem with doing this on the computer, as you guys that have done this with me for a long time, is I lose these. They just disappear on me, and like a new batch of them just show up randomly. So if I get through reading half of your question and I don't quite catch your name, I apologize. Let's see here. We already have power outages going in a lot of places. Let's see here. Yeah, folks in Tylertown and in Walthall and in parts of Marion County already without power. That's just going to continue. Folks in Pearl River County are probably dealing with power outages as well. Same goes in Stone County. Folks in Hattiesburg checking in saying it's the calm before the storm. I would say so. Your storm is right down the street. But, this isn't going to be some catastrophic event. I mean, 20 to 40 mile an hour wind, a fair bit of rain, and then you get a batch of some gusty winds, some heavier rain, as well as a chance for a handful of tornadoes across the area in the place where that little arm tries to set up. But I think everybody else is probably going to get through this with some trees down, some power outages for sure. as well as probably some flooded roadways. But I had somebody send me a message, and they were trying to ask if this was comparing to Hurricane Katrina. And for those of you that lived through Katrina, you probably just heard me say that, and you're probably chuckling to yourselves. But for those of you that didn't live through that, no, that's not what this is going to be like. And for those of you that did live through it and that worry about that all the time, no, that's not what this is going to be like at all, which is great. For as rough as it's going to be over the next 6 to 12 hours with the rain and the gusty wind, thank goodness it's going to be nothing like that. Is this still a hurricane? We'll find out here in about 20 minutes from the National Hurricane Center, though based on what I've seen on radar and looking at satellite, I would say no, it's probably just a tropical storm at this point, and probably not a hurricane. Is there a chance that it can shift to the east more? Yes, there is. There is a chance that we can shift things off to the east, but it'll start to probably wobble a little bit as it moves north, so we may see a shift to the east, and then it'll kind of wobble back to the west. Because there's not a very stout flow in the atmosphere or any kind of directionality, it's going to tend to kind of wobble more than storms normally would. People want me to say game time. Oh, goodness sakes. No, it's been a minute, Tom, for me to say what time is it? It's game time. Although that was usually Taylor who did that. He was always the what time is it guy. Let's see here. What time will the worst of things be? That's a good question. So I would say that for you folks they're asking here, like, hey, look, Nick, I get it. You're gonna have some rain, and there's probably gonna be a round of gusty wind, but I need to know what time is that? Probably while you're sleeping. Honestly, probably while you're sleeping. And that's why it's important to have shameless plug, hopefully my app on your phone, but some weather app on your phone to let you know when the National Weather Service issues some sort of warning for your area. And maybe having a NOAA weather radio is probably also a good bet, particularly along the Gulf Coast like this. But picking out specifically when the worst will be for an individual county, I could do it, but I would probably be wrong. I'll be honest. I could give it a shot, but I think I would be wrong because it is going to be dictated by those two factors I mentioned a couple of times. That kind of arm of heavier, that band of heavier rain, as well as where the center of this storm is going to be. But I would say probably, most likely, depending on your location, it's going to be after midnight, but before 5 a.m. And I know that's kind of a broad window, but it really is dictated by how those two things play out, as well as where you are specifically. Later into the overnight hours and earlier into the morning, the farther north you are. So you could say, oh, if I'm in Heidelberg, it's probably a little bit closer to 4 a.m. versus if I'm in let's call it Agricola. Maybe it's a little bit closer to 1 a.m. or midnight. So kind of keep that in mind as we head through the overnight hours here. What time is everything going to be all done? And is it all going to be finished? Probably tomorrow morning when you wake up, depending on what time you get up and move in and out of bed. Probably sometime between I'm going to set this radar into motion and kind of zoom back out here so I can monitor this while we're chatting. Probably tomorrow morning, the farther south you live, closer to the coast, a little bit earlier. Folks on the Mississippi coast, southeastern Louisiana, folks in New Orleans, for instance, you've got probably another hour of breezy rain, and then you're pretty much done. Then you're breezy dry. And so as this thing kind of shimmies north at about 15 miles an hour, you can think, okay, well, if I'm traveling at 15 miles an hour, how long is it going to take me to go from New Orleans to, Lumberton? And I would say, okay, well, if it takes, about an hour and change going at highway speed, let's divide that by 4. So about 4 hours from now. Okay, cool. So 4 hours from now, that's about 2 a.m. Okay, sweet. There you go. And then as you move north, you can kind of do the same calculation. You say, okay, well, Hattiesburg, you're probably done by about 4 a.m., let's say. You folks in Laurel, maybe by 5 a.m. Folks in Bay Springs, let's call it about 7 a.m. But that's going to be dictated, again, by how fast this drifts north. And if you can think about like throwing a stick into a pond on a breezy day and saying, well, how long is it going to take for that stick to make it to the other side of the pond? That's kind of what forecasting this thing is right now. You don't, is it going to wobble this way, wobble that way? Is it going to make a beeline? As much as I love meteorology and the science of it and trying to figure it out, I can't give you a solid answer on that one. Let's see here. And yeah, the county by county forecast is up on the app. If you want to, after the discussion's over, to dive on there and read up about everything, please feel free. I try to put as much information on there as I possibly can. Is Jones County considered the right front quadrant? Yes, it is, Dina. Ooh, smart on you. The right front quadrant. I like it. Yeah, so if you were to take this thing and make a quadrant out of it, yeah, you would be right front. In fact, most of the area is in the right front quadrant right now. I also tend to think that the rear right quadrant may also deal with some pretty gusty wind and some heavy rain in this particular situation, because as we go down here, right, this little arm feature right here is in the right rear quadrant. And so usually, yes, the right front quadrant is the worst. That's true here. But there's also going to be, in this particular situation, the right rear quadrant offering the chance for some heavy rain, gusty wind, and the potential for a couple of tornadoes as well. But good on you, Dina, for knowing your quadrants. Let's see here. Asking, how do I get the app? Oh, just head to your app store. You can search for my name. You can search for Nickel Block Forecasting, which the name for that is its own long and dumb story. But you can search for that name too. Oh, maybe one day I'll share that on here. Let's see here. I'm just trying to catch up on any questions. The comments finally slowed down for me. Usually just tosses these things. I think I tricked it, and I can actually scroll through what you guys are saying. This is glorious. Got to get the water table up. Yeah, Tom, this is actually probably pretty good for the water table, all things considered. Yes, we do have to earn it a little bit with some of the gusty wind. We're probably going to lose some trees. Folks are going to lose power. And there is a chance for some tornadoes. So this doesn't come for free, but this will probably be good for the water table for sure. And thanks, folks, for the kind words. Some of you guys are saying thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to help when I can. MSU canceled. Classes are canceled. Okay. Okay, sweet. Okay, thank you for that one. Yeah, 1,300 people without power now across the area. Have there been any tornado warnings yet? No, there actually haven't been any tornado warnings yet, which is not that surprising yet. They'll probably start to pick up here in the next hour as this thing kind of morphs from, kind of a true hurricane into kind of this quasi-tropical storm, some dry air infused in there kind of a system. And then it's only going to be in probably that right front and that right rear quadrant that I was just talking about. What time would you say that you'll know where that little arm thing is going to go? When it gets there, unfortunately. Short of when we look at some of the model guidance, and here I can bump back over to the model guidance here. There it is. Short of looking at some of this model guidance, so there's that arm right there, right? And so look at how that presses all the way into Alabama, and then we get fully dry slotted in here as this moves north. That's all the way into Florida now on this one model. I'll show you a different one here in a second. But the reason that I say, when it gets there, is it's not really a forecast, Nick. I thought you were a meteorologist. You're spot on. I'm not going to argue with you there. But the reason why I say that is if we look at this other model guidance, and we say, let's do that one, and we say, where's that arm? There's that arm right there. and it just falls apart, and then you get a different one that fires up a little bit closer in, and that one drifts across parts of, we'll call it South Mississippi as this moves off to the north. And then we can look at a different model. How about this one? And this one has that arm basically fling itself across Florida, Alabama, and into parts of South Mississippi. And you're probably watching this going, yeah, well, which one's right, Nick? None of them are right. None of these things are good at figuring this out because these are they're not like rare, but they're just not modeled very well by our computers, the big supercomputers that run all of these things. And so you kind of have to just like eyeball it and look at some like super small mesoscale stuff is what we call it. And I could really get into the weeds right now on that. But I will spare you guys a lot of that, and I'll say I'll monitor this, but I will say that the trajectory of the rear end of this, right? So here's your quadrant area right here, and so if we break this into quadrants, right? So there's your rear right quadrant is down here. Notice how these are kind of moving this direction like that. These are kind of moving that direction, and then these are moving that way. So this whole line is kind of swinging, kind of open. I think that as this drifts this direction, a lot of arrows on the map, I know, you're probably going to start to see these producing tornado warnings in the next hour or two. These guys back here will probably end up lifting more like that as this one lifts north too, and they'll start producing tornado warnings in the next 2 to 3 hours. And so you end up in a situation where, if I'm just kind of eyeballing things for you guys, in the next hour or two here, in the next 2 to 3 hours the tornado thread's here, in the next 2 to 4 hours, then we move to here, and then the kind of 4 to 6 hours we're kind of in here, right? So it kind of marches its way north, but that's all based off of looking at radar. So, and that's the best we can do because I don't think the models are modeling things very well necessarily. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see here. How much longer for folks down in Picayune? You guys are actually going to be dealing with the strongest of the stuff here coming up in... You're going to get a little bit of a lull, and then the strongest of the stuff will drift through between now and probably about 11:30 tonight. And then I think by midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning, stuff will really start to calm down for you. And then after 2, I think you folks will probably be nice and calm by that point. Let's see here. Oh, and for folks that have donated to kind of help the cause and buy me a pizza and coffee, I just saw a comment about that. First off, thank you so much. For you folks that donated, that's like so nice for you to do. Like, I don't even know how to say a proper thank you. I took myself out to lunch today. I did only have a bowl of cereal for dinner tonight because I've been doing all of this as well as my normal 9 to 5, which is a lot of work right now for completely different reasons. But I do plan on taking myself out for dinner to get the pizza, and I'll probably get myself, I don't know, like a latte or something tomorrow. So thank you so much for you folks that donated. Very kind of you. Really, really was. So thank you. Seriously. Okay, so back to this. What should I expect in pedal? Rain and wind. I don't mean to like laugh and be flippant, but I'm sure I already answered this question. It's just from 10 minutes ago. and so I'm sure I probably already answered that question. Yeah, so it looks like the National Hurricane Center maybe just released their thing. I just got a ping from the other room. So let's see if they did. And yeah, so here's the latest update. Let me flip you guys over here. Latest update from the National Hurricane Center. It's back down to a tropical storm as of 10 o'clock. Wind at 70 miles an hour. And it is moving northeast at 16 miles an hour. Based on the previous spot. I would say it's moving more north-northeast. We'll see if it actually curly cues off to the east as much as this forecast is showing. I don't know that I necessarily fully believe that. But we'll see about how much of a easterly kick we get out of this in terms. Well, I guess, the center of the cone. I'll buy that. I'll buy the center of the cone there. Okay, National Hurricane Center and all of your meteorologists, all your PhDs. I'll buy it. I laugh. They're like the smartest hurricane forecasters on the planet. And I'm sitting here going, well, I don't know. Me and my master's degree. I trust people that are smarter than you. That's all I'll say. I do it all the time. Folks at National Hurricane Center know their stuff. So I trust them when they say, hey, this is, maybe I'll give them a little side eye every once in a while. I go, really, guys? But at the end of the day, they're smarter than I'll ever be. So I trust these guys and girls to do a great job. Okay, back to a couple of questions here. Looking hard, trying to figure out what time things are going to get rough. For folks in Wayne County, you guys got a couple of hours before probably the roughest of the rough shows up. Again, it'll probably be early tomorrow morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Maybe as early as 2 if this thing really gets a move on. What time will that northern eye wall enter Mississippi? It looks like it's moving east of 55, possibly. Yeah, Mark, I actually think that it is going to be east of 50, the kind of core of this thing. So if we look at 55 here, 55 is right in there. And we've got 59 that goes right up there, right? That was a terrible job, Nick. Let me try that again. Oh, come on, don't lose my pen. There we go, 59. And then we've got 55 right in here. And then, kind of 12 meets back up with 10 and goes back over to Mobile. And then the other 10 kind of goes around like that. They meet up in Baton Rouge where the traffic is terrible. So I think the core of this thing is probably going to sneak up the west side of 59 here. And if we kind of follow the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, it kind of says the same thing. That means the core of this thing is going to move through Picayune and eventually hit you folks in Lumberton, Purvis, and Hattiesburg over the next few hours. The good news is it's going to fall apart as it moves off to the north, which is why I tend to think that your sustained wind is probably going to peak, somewhere between 50 to 60 for you folks further to south. Then it was like 45 to 50, so you got your way a little bit closer to Highway 98, and it was like kind of like 40 to 45 as you got up to 84, because I think the core of this thing is really going to fall apart as it does so. It's still going to have heavy rain, still going to have some pretty gusty wind gusts up to 50, 60, maybe even approaching 70 miles an hour, but it'll lose a lot of its punch as it lifts off to the north. Voting that it just fully falls apart. I need some sleep. Mariah, you and me both. Let's see here. First time having to deal with anything like this. Okay. PJ, thank you for checking in. Yeah, no, hopefully you didn't go out chasing in this thing either. I wouldn't do that. Wiggins getting some good rain and a ton of wind. Thanks, Cody, for checking in. Yeah, once you mix down some of the wind in here, and in fact, we can pause this thing and let's look at the velocity over Wiggins right now. So you've got 60 mile an hour wind aloft. If you mix some of that down, it's probably a little bit closer to 50 miles an hour, but that's a good 50 mile an hour wind gust right now. And you guys haven't even gotten the meat and taters of the heaviest of the rain and the strongest of the cells and the strongest of the wind probably either. Let's see here. Post some selfies with your pizza and coffee. You'll see plenty of pizza selfies. That's what I'll do for sure. Let's see here. Do you have a PayPal? Yes, I do, Bev. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so you can find the link to the PayPal to donate. It's on the county by county forecasts that I've done for the last handful of them that I've done. if you want to help out and donate too. And I can't tell you how. I think there's like 40 people that have donated money, and you guys are all fantastic for doing it. You guys are going to feed me for like a week or two. It's great. Look, I have no complaints, and I'm super thankful. I'm happy to do this and help folks out as best I can, and it warms my heart to know that people are friendly and helpful back. But it's not surprising, I suppose, because South Mississippi has some of the, and Louisiana and Alabama, some of the nicest folks that I ever came across. Please add Hinds County. Hinds County should have been in there on the breakdown. Hinds County, somebody comment and let me know if Hinds County is in there. I'm pretty sure. Hold on a second. I got it pulled up right here. People don't need to comment. There we go. Hinds says, so there's Rankin, Scott, okay, blah, blah, blah. Capaya, Simpson, okay. I could have sworn. I think Hinds is in the miscellaneous, would you add it to this thing list? Neshoba, Franklin, Hinds County, there you go. So there's your forecast for Hinds County. I knew it was in there. So some of these counties, by the way, aren't really in the areas that I normally talk about, but it's just requested counties, right? Like some people that comment frequently, not just one-offs. If you show up once and you're like, hey, what about, Emmett County? I'm going to go, I can't help you. But for number one, because that's like way out of town. But number two, I don't know if you're somebody that's a normal person or if you're just flying by to be like, hey, what about where I live? But for folks that have asked frequently, I tried to add some of these in here. One of them was St. Charles Parish, which I didn't know that I had a following there, but there you go. And that's where it was pretty rough a little bit earlier, and stuff is really starting to calm down now through 4 a.m. You folks in St. Charles Parish are probably going to calm down in the next hour. Thank goodness. So it's at least getting out of your guys' neck of the woods pretty quickly. Okay, back over to radar here. And we'll look at some of the other comments. Pin the PayPal link. I wish I knew how. It is tough enough. I don't want to touch anything on the comments right now because I got them working. So I'll be honest, I'm not going to touch anything. Let's see here. Is the cone a little bit closer to Hattiesburg at this time? That's a good question. I would say maybe slightly. I mean, and you're splitting hairs at that point because you're talking about a cone that was maybe like that now and was maybe previously like this. The cone's about where the center is, which dictates a lot of the other stuff, sure, but the cone is, whatever, we'll call it about 30 miles wide, and a shift of 2 or 3 miles in the forecast, it doesn't really matter much. I'll be honest, the cone kind of doesn't matter anymore because this thing, number one, is on shore, and number two, doesn't really have a very good steering current. And it's now all based on what the local National Weather Service offices can actually see with their radar, and all the local folks, the Hurricane Center, they do great at the stuff that's over the water. But once something's on shore, I go with the National Hurricane or the National Weather Service offices before I go with the National Hurricane Center for stuff like this. Let's see here. Are the tornado chances still low? Marty, no. Tornado chances were never low. Looks like we got a new warning for just south of Baldwin County over in Alabama. But no, the tornado chances are never low, and this is one place that that I think this one particular system is weird and unique and interesting. In that, let me see here. Let me pull back over here. In that, I tend to think that this little arm thing that's out here, this rain band, is going to be probably your main tornado producer. We already have some outside of that. But I kind of wonder if we even get anything close to the core. Now, sometimes in other storms that have come on shore in the last handful of years, you get these little brief spin-ups that are, kind of within, let's call it, let me get my little measuring tape out here. We'll call it kind of within, what would that be, 50 miles of the center of a storm. And I actually don't think in this case we see that because of the dry air that's getting, we call it entrained in here, that's getting pulled in, which leaves this boundary right here where I think all of the riffraff is going to be. So as this lifts north, if you get the core, you get the strong winds of the core of the storm and the decaying eye wall and everything else. But I tend to think that the tornado threat is probably going to be a little farther out, which means that it's generally lower because it's kind of confined to one area. But it's not low where that area is because I tend to think that that's where we're going to see most of them. So, no, I don't think it's... So, Marty, I know that's not a great answer to your question. I recognize that completely. So, I'll say this. Yes, the tornado threat is low, generally across the area. But it is markedly higher than normal in a specific area where this little rain band arm appendage, whatever you want to call it, decides to go, or if a secondary one fires up in the kind of the middle space between it. And where we see those is probably going to be where we see the highest tornado risk. Let's see here. All right, Petal is without power. Hang in there, folks, in Petal. Been cooking like crazy, hoping the power stays on. Good for you. Purvis and Lumberton, I would say that the brunt of this thing is probably going to be between now and probably about 4 hours from now. Let's see. Oh goodness, there it goes. I just broke the comments. I just got a whole bunch of new ones. Well, it was fun while it lasted. That's for sure. No one has said. TJ says no one has said Cape in months. Well, here's the interesting thing about. Here we'll go back over here. We'll have some fun. I don't think I can get to my AI assisted models here. Let's see if I can actually pull it up this way. Oh, I can. How about that? If you need some Cape in your life, I have good news for you. Here's a look at your instability. Here's your Cape. Right now, this is this morning stuff as we head through this evening. Here we are, about 200, 300 Cape in the low levels of the atmosphere. All of this is like surface-based low-level stuff. This isn't deep at all. In terms of your wind gusts, we kind of run this forward. Go to 11 o'clock, so you can see that we're talking about wind gusts between about 40 and 50 miles an hour. Here we are, 10, 11, 12, 1. You see 70 mile an hour wind gusts across parts of Marion County. Robust stuff around 1 o'clock in the morning. Here we are at 2 o'clock, still 70 mile an hour wind gusts. Spreading a little bit farther. This is probably overdoing it a little bit, which is surprising because oftentimes this AI-assisted stuff underplays and undercuts some of these wind gusts. And then we're back down to around 50 to 60 miles an hour, around 70 for you folks in Collins, around 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., stuff still blustery with 40 to 50 mile an hour wind. So there you go. There's a look at some of the, and this was a link. I put this up on the Facebook page a little bit earlier. We can look at precip probability. That'd be kind of funny to look at. It's got to be like 100%, right? As we move through. Come on, AI, do your job. Yeah, 95 to 100%. Okay, cool. Sweet. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But notice the back edge of this is pretty quick. So here we are at 1 a.m. and your rain chance in New Orleans is 6%. As we go through 4 and 5 a.m., you're really starting to peel back on the rain chances farther to the south. By 8 a.m., really no threat for rain. It's all off to the north. So you can kind of watch this thing march itself to the north. So we can get back to the radar here. Oh, thank you for trusting me with the forecast. I really appreciate it. Let's see here. Yeah, for folks asking, yeah. So if you're living along the coast, that you're going to get some of this heavy rain and gusty wind for a while as this kind of rain band slides on through. It's Hancock, Harrison, and Jackson County over the next couple of hours, but things should kind of ease back through about let's call it 2 a.m. Um, Yeah, and that goes for you folks, yeah, in Bay St. Louis, Leah. Hopefully that answers kind of your question there. You guys are getting dry slotted a little bit, but I tend to think you'll get swung around some extra rain and some pretty gusty wind here in the next little bit. So, um, but that takes me through all the comments that I could get through, and hopefully I covered everything on the radar just fine, and you guys feel pretty comfortable about what's kind of headed your direction. I have a 4 a.m. alarm tomorrow morning. So, being that we've already heard from the National Hurricane Center at 10 o'clock, hopefully I've given you guys enough information over the last little bit to get you guys through this for the next little bit. If I haven't, there's more information over on the app on that county by county breakdown for you guys. Everyone have a safe night. You'll be all right. Download the Nickel Block Forecasting app. Shameless plug, I know. But it will ping you when the National Weather Service issues a tornado warning for your area, if they do, or an extreme wind warning or whatever. If you just leave the volume on, you let it like follow you, right? If you're new to downloading it, you download it, says, "Hey, can we like know your location?" I promise, I don't care where you are. I don't want that information. I don't want to sell that information to anybody. That's far too complicated. I don't have the time for that. What I do have the time to do, though, is work with a vendor that will allow an app to follow you and ping you from the National Weather Service when they do issue a warning for your area. That's the only reason I want your location. So everyone have a good night. Again, stay safe and hang in there. And I'll check in on all of you guys tomorrow morning. Have a good night.